What's the most disturbing secret you've uncovered about someone close to you? Story 1. Growing up, I had an estranged sister from my dad's first marriage, but I never knew why she left. I was always told vague things. When my brother passed away when I was around 12 years old, a relative went out of their way to contact her and invite her to the funeral. She called the house, and my father spoke with her in private. When he came out of the room, he said he was done with her and told us she had been nasty to him on the phone and wasn't coming to the funeral. I was upset and angry because I wanted to meet my sister, and I couldn't believe she would do something like that to my grieving father. Fast forward to age 19. I was visiting a relative in Ireland, the same one who had reached out to my sister back then. We were drunk at a bar when she let it slip that she was with my sister that day when she made the phone call. It was actually my father who was nasty to her and made her cry in the coffee shop. She had her bags packed, ready to attend her brother's funeral, but she didn't go because of my dad. I literally saw red. I still haven't spoken to my sister, but my father now has 2 estranged children. Story 2. My father cheated on my brother's mother with my mom, who had no idea. They got married and I was born on their 1-year wedding anniversary. He then started cheating on my mom with multiple women. Even when he was visiting his mother, my grandmother, on her deathbed, he still found time to meet up with someone behind my mom's back. While my mother and I went back to our home state, he stayed to bury his mother. After he left my mom, he remarried in Mexico to someone who was the same age as my brother from his first marriage. In 2011, he passed away from a heart attack while driving on the freeway. He actually managed to park before it happened. My brother and I had to collect his belongings, and while going through his phone, we weren't exactly shocked by what we found. As expected, he was cheating on his wife in Mexico. The names in his contacts were saved as boss, lawyer, and other fake labels. But when we checked the messages, we knew exactly what was going on. So we did him one final favor. We wiped his phone clean. This man was a player until the day he died. Scumbag? Definitely. But from what I heard, his past wasn't exactly easy either. Story 3. All right, this is going to be a long one, and a lot of context is needed, along with some ugly things I learned along the way. About 6 to 7 years ago, I was in a tough housing situation. I live in a city where rent is prohibitively expensive and housing is in high demand. I had just found out that my letting agency was renovating the place I lived in, which meant that my former flatmate, whom I hated, and I had to move out. I posted online looking for new flatmates, and this guy reached out, asking to meet up and see if we could work something out. I recognized him from anime conventions, which, let's be honest, is rarely a good start. I had chatted with him a few times, had drinks with him, and we were friends on Facebook. He had been close friends with some of my close friends. So we sat down for dinner at a Chinese place and talked. That's when he casually mentioned that he had dissociative episodes, times when he would wake up not knowing where he had been or what he had done. He even told me that once he woke up with blood on his hands and had no idea how it got there. I smiled and said something like, "Yeah, that's not ideal, man," while internally thinking, I am absolutely not moving in with this guy. Fast forward a few weeks, and several of my friends made vague references to an incident involving him at an anime convention. Nobody would go into detail, just that there was an ongoing investigation. I wasn't exactly surprised given what he had told me, but no one said more until a few years later. That's when I got a message from someone I knew, telling me to unfriend him. Apparently, he had just been convicted of violently attacking a girl at knife point at an anime convention and had been sentenced. Suddenly, everything clicked. My mutual friends finally opened up. They had known this guy since their early teens and had been really close to him. When the event happened, he told them the girl had made it all up and that he was innocent. They cautiously wanted to believe him and kept quiet, only speaking to the authorities. But when the case went to trial, they attended and were horrified. The evidence against him was undeniable. He had been caught with a bag containing a knife, rope, duct tape, the whole setup. And it turned out the girl he attacked wasn't even his intended target. He had actually planned to go after a girl one of my friends was dating at the time. He thought she had been leading him on after a long dry spell. He even admitted that he had considered doing something far worse. I don't know the victim personally, but I can only imagine what she went through. Needless to say, discovering that one of their closest friends from childhood was capable of something so horrific completely shattered my friends. It was a first-hand look at how complicated, traumatic, and messy things like this can be. To make things worse, some people refused to believe it. One girl who had known him for years and initially doubted his guilt started receiving anonymous threats just because she had once defended him. Honestly, screw that guy. He's in jail now, and that's exactly where he belongs. But cases like this show how these situations bring out the absolute worst in people, not just the perpetrators, but the ones who try to cover for them too. Story 4. A friend of mine slept with her boyfriend's best friend while extremely drunk, and I think her third child might be his, not her boyfriend's. She and her boyfriend have 2 kids together, but this third child looks nothing like him. The first 2 have brown eyes and brown hair, just like both parents, but the third, blue-eyed and ginger, just like the other guy. She's a childhood friend, and I rarely see her. When she told me what happened, I encouraged her to tell her boyfriend. She admitted it while heavily pregnant, so I think she had already realized it was a possibility. It definitely only happened once. She never implied that anything was forced, but she used to be the kind of person who couldn't control her drinking and often ended up in messy situations as a teen. From what I heard, they were both incredibly drunk. The reason I haven't said anything is because their relationship is already strange. I don't know him well, but I doubt it would help anything. They're officially dating, but they don't act like a couple. They don't live together, and her boyfriend doesn't really provide for the 2 kids they know are his. He was making plenty of money while my friend was struggling to get by, wearing clothes with holes in them. I'm not sure why they're even in a relationship, but they are. It's public on his profile too. Around the time the third baby was born, her boyfriend's dad passed away. I don't think her boyfriend cheats, but their whole relationship just seems off. I'm completely against cheating, but I don't feel like it's my place to rock the boat. Nothing is confirmed paternity-wise, and I haven't been in contact with either of them in real life for the past few years. But every time I see that child, I remember what she told me. Story 5. I found out, after 24 and a half years, that my mother brainwashed me into believing my father had hurt me and my brother. I didn't learn the truth until I went to jail for a 10-month sentence. After that, I decided to start over in another state and reconnect with my father, to at least give him a chance. That's when he showed me the court documents proving that the judge had dismissed the case because it was obvious my brother and I had been coached. The record stated that we had admitted our mother told us what to say and that our stories didn't even match. I was only 11 at the time, so I barely remembered anything, but my mom was always manipulative. She had told me she dropped the charges to protect us from a long, grueling trial, but the court papers said otherwise. She lied. So after 14 years, I reunited with my father and found out the truth. She made me hate him growing up, kept us away from his parents, and I never got to see them before they passed. And to this day, she denies everything. Story 6. I hope this all makes sense because, honestly, it sounds like something straight out of a midday TV drama. Names have been changed. My mom and dad have been married for over 30 years. 10 years ago, when I was 27, I found out that my mom had been married to another man when she was 19 and had a daughter with him. That daughter is my half-sister Claire, someone my parents completely pretended did not exist. I had no idea she was even real. At the same time, I also found out that my eldest brother, Sam, is actually my half-brother. He left home when I was young, so I don't have many memories of him. He came back into our lives briefly when I was 16, only to have a massive argument with my parents when I was 18, and we never heard from him again. Suddenly, everything made sense. Mom and Dad were always especially critical of him, and now I don't blame him for cutting them off completely. I found out all of this because Claire reached out on Facebook and told my other brother Peter, point blank, that she was our half-sister. My brother was furious, which forced our parents to finally tell us the truth. Apparently, they were trying to protect us. Pretty sure they were just never planning to tell us. Mom casually mentioned that Sam was also her first husband's son, and I replied, "Wait, Sam is my half-brother?" To which she nonchalantly said, "Well, duh." She then turned on the tears, and at the time I comforted her. But honestly, the past 10 years have been incredibly hard for me. I don't trust my parents at all. Claire had lived with my nan since she was 4. When Mom got with Dad, they tolerated Sam, but Claire was never wanted. She ran away from home multiple times before my nan finally took her in for good. I only saw my nan twice in my entire life. The first time when I was 18, and the last time just before she passed away. I had no idea about any of this before she died. My mom avoided all contact with my nan and pop when I was growing up, and now I understand exactly why. My parents like to pretend everything is fine, but I've never fully recovered from it. Even getting a text from my mother gives me anxiety. I moved 2 hours away, and in the 8 years I've been here, they've never once offered to visit. But they still expect me to visit every Christmas and every other month. And if I don't, my mom guilts me about it. Sorry, I've barely spoken to anyone about this, other than a therapist. My heart is actually racing just posting this. Thanks to anyone who made it this far. Story 7. Bit of a side story about my father's life, but one I wanted to share regardless. When he was a kid, he had a really rough childhood. He was the so-called love child of my grandmother and my biological grandfather, only to be abandoned at the young age of 5. From what I've heard, the two of them genuinely loved each other, but their families were so against their relationship that they even went as far as canceling their wedding after it was already well underway. It just sucked. He couldn't remember much of his childhood, not even if he tried. Certain memories were just gone. At some point, though, he grew bitter. So bitter that he began to loathe his own father. For context, after a few years, his mother did take him back, but by then she was already married to someone else. My father was suddenly introduced to a new stepfather and 3 step siblings he never even knew existed. I don't know how, but at some point, he heard that his real dad was living it up, married to someone new, wealthy, and raising a happy family. He had supported his other kids with both money and affection, encouraged their goals and dreams, and all that time, he never reached out to him, never offered a single word of support. He was like a ghost, completely absent from my father's life. I can't even imagine how that must have felt. He grew to hate everyone, even himself. He used to say that maybe he shouldn't have been born at all, and let's just say his stepdad didn't make things any better. The man was beyond abusive, to the point that he would pour boiling water on his own children and even on the farm animals he raised, just because he believed it was right. I really don't even want to describe what kind of person he was, but you get the idea. Fast forward a few decades. My father was already an adult, and one day, while visiting his mother, he was helping her clean up when he reached for something on the top of her closet. An old chest fell to the ground, breaking open, revealing a massive pile of old open letters. Letters from his real father. It turns out there wasn't a single month when his father hadn't written to him as a child. Simple things like, "How's school? What are you doing this Saturday? Want to meet up? I hope you're eating well." Birthday cards, Valentine's cards, Christmas cards, hell, even just random, out-of-the-blue letters. The truth was, his father never forgot about him. He loved him deeply. There wasn't a single day when he wasn't thinking about him. And the worst part? He had sent money too. Money meant to pay for my father's tuition, for gifts, even for allowances so he could buy the things he wanted. He had even bought him a plane ticket so he could come visit. And what did my grandmother do? What did his own mother do? She hid them all. She stole the money for herself, likely using a lot of it to fund her awful husband's gambling addiction. My dad told me that in that moment, his whole world shattered, not just from the pain or the betrayal of his own blood, but because he had spent his entire life hating a man who, unbeknownst to him, had loved him all along. And the saddest part? By the time he found out the truth, my real grandfather was already on his deathbed. Story 8. My youngest brother, who was, by all accounts, a sweet, sensitive kid with a virginity pledge alongside his girlfriend, turned out to be sleeping with her mother. He literally called this woman mom and then ran off to marry her after his girlfriend caught them in bed. He also got kicked out of the army because his girlfriend's dad was an army chaplain, and apparently the military frowns on officers sneaking around with other men's wives, especially on base. He had even been warned about it multiple times. Most of this we didn't find out until much later. At the time, his story was that he was dropping out of high school in his senior year to live with his girlfriend's family until they were both 18 so they could get married. My parents tried everything to change his mind. They even took him to counseling until the counselor had a private session with him and told them he was genuinely worried that my brother was going to hurt them or himself. So they let him go. About a month later, he sent a letter saying he never wanted to hear from any of us ever again. A few months after that, everything really hit the fan. His girlfriend caught him in bed with her mother, and he was kicked out of the army. When we cleared out his room, since we needed the space for a new baby, we found a bunch of stuff he had apparently stolen from us, along with letters where he detailed how much he hated all of us. The only mention of me, he called me a lonely loser in one of them. The latest update we have on him? He works at Home Depot. He did marry his ex-girlfriend's mom. They moved in with her mother. He's thinking about going to electrician school, and he's bitter that my parents aren't chasing after him, despite making it very clear that he never wanted to see them again. My parents have been devastated, but they're choosing to respect his wishes. Everything we know about him now comes through mutual friends, his ex-girlfriend, and his mommy-wife's Facebook. Story 9. I spent 10 years with my ex-partner. I raised both his kids, had a baby with him. I found out 18 months after we separated that he had been having an affair with a mom from the kids' school. It had started about 2 years into our relationship and carried on for years. I messaged her privately, and she told me that from the moment we started at that school, he had told her and everyone else that I was just his live-in au pair, not his partner. So my entire community watched us live as a couple for a decade, and not one person told me he was having an affair. I worked at the school as a teacher and a counselor. Not even one of my friends ever said a word to me. That woman told me that when we publicly announced we were expecting a baby, she realized the truth and confronted him. He told her that we had just gotten together. She said he would bring the children I was raising to wonderful family picnics and outings, spend lots of money on her kids, take family photos, and even go on vacations together. So basically, he had his kids keeping the secret from me too. He also proposed to me about 4 years into the relationship in front of his kids, saying his divorce had finally come through. In reality, it hadn't. He was still married to his first wife. When I confronted him about it, he admitted everything. He told me they were still very close friends, spoke weekly, and that he was angry because she had moved to another state when we had our daughter, claiming it had broken his heart. For many years, I thought I must have been really naive and stupid. But as I got older, I realized it's normal to trust and love your partner, especially when they're super close with your dad, uncles, and brothers. Some people are just liars and cheaters, and they do this to anyone. Story 10. My cousins moved in with me, my mom, my brother, and my sister when I was 14 or 15. First, one cousin came, then the second, and then their stepsister because their dad was a waste of space who married an abusive man. Eventually, the stepsister left on her own, and then the first cousin followed because of how she treated her sister. Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We moved after that, and I ended up sharing a room with my second cousin, who I considered a sister. My mom eventually met a man, C, after spending over 10 years focusing on us. He was fun, always around, came to my plays, and was accepted by all of us. As he, C, and I had a bunk bed, bottom double, top single, which was mine. She would often go stay at her mom's overnight, even though her mom was a raging alcoholic. We thought it was weird, but it was still her mother. Whenever she was away, I would sleep in her bed because it was a double. I had never had a double bed before, so I used it whenever I could. One night, when she was away, I noticed the pillow was stuffed with something. I reached inside and pulled out a belt. The pillow was still lumpy, so I kept searching and found a shirt. It was undoubtedly C's. She wrote everything in her diary, and I knew that's where I'd find my answers. So, I read it. After everything my mom had done for her, giving her a new start in the hope of a promising future, I found out she had been sleeping with C for months. She was 17. He was 41. That was about 14 years ago. They were together for a long time. But I recently found out she's now single and devastated after a betrayal. Apparently, C isn't single. My guess? Karma came knocking. Story 11. My older brother got together with my best friend when she was 16 and he was 19. She liked him too and later told me she had wanted to tell me but was afraid I wouldn't support it. I was a bit uncomfortable with the idea, but I supported them because they were both somewhat lonely and had similar interests. Plus, I figured I couldn't stop them from liking each other, so it was their choice. Over time, I started noticing little lies from her, things about her interests and personality that didn't quite add up. She'd say things like, "Oh, I love kickboxing and boxing," but when my best friend and I invited her to join, she wouldn't because she didn't like sweating. It was odd, but I brushed it off, thinking maybe she had just found a new interest and was trying to fit in. They were together for about 3 months before she suddenly called me, saying she wanted to break up with him because her parents didn't like him. I told her that ultimately it was her decision, not just theirs. She called back later crying, saying she had cut it off and was proud of herself. I felt awkward and unsure what to say because I knew my brother would be crushed. He always talked about her like she was his whole world. I supported her again, but reminded her to always trust her own judgment. Later, I saw the texts she had sent him, and they were brutal. She had broken up with him through messages, saying things like, "Our relationship wasn't even surface level. You weren't that interesting. And from the beginning, I honestly didn't think we were ever going to work." This was after she had initiated their first kiss barely a week into talking, at least according to him. My brother was devastated. It was the first time I ever had to comfort him as his little sister because he had never really confided in me before. I didn't like how she had suddenly cut him off so coldly. Then just a few days later at the mall, she made a joke about getting with someone's dad because her mom mentioned he was rich. Her older brother immediately shut her down saying, Time and place, that's not funny. After that, she started becoming distant, and I began noticing changes in her and her family. Her baby cousin started acting weird and snooty around me. Her mom's tone became fake, ending conversations with a dismissive, "Love you, bye," while walking off before I could respond. Even her dad started treating me differently, calling me disrespectful just because I asked if she could hang out with us outside of her house. That summer, my best friend and I got into a small argument with her about how she ignored our texts and calls, but would only respond when she needed something to keep her occupied. Instead of talking it out, she ghosted both of us and blocked us out of nowhere. Then her mom started posting fake friend quotes on social media, tagging her with captions like, "I love you, baby. Friends are temporary, but family is forever." It was wild. Throughout our 6 years of friendship, I had never spoken badly about her. I had always encouraged her, supported her, and genuinely wished her the best. After my dad passed, her family had even comforted me, telling me I was like a second family to them and could always come to them for anything. A year later, she finally reached out, and that's when I found out the truth. My brother had been trying to isolate her. He told her she wasn't his type, that if he had just seen her, he wouldn't have gone for her. He apparently called her average, said her family was controlling, and convinced her that he was the only one she could trust. He even told her that I talked down on her almost every day and that I had encouraged her to cut me off. It's insane to think that my own brother went to such extremes to ruin my friendship just so he could have her. Story 12. In university, I was part of a pretty close group of friends. We had regular gatherings and held evening dinners every Friday. The idea was to create an intentional community where we supported each other and those around us. Some members were beginner activists, heavily involved in local issues related to race and LGBTQ discrimination. We had an open-door policy, pooling resources to help anyone in need. At the time, I had a coworker who was really struggling. She had just been kicked out of her house for being a lesbian, or at least that's what she told me. I introduced her to my group, and everyone welcomed her, eager to help in any way possible. I even talked to my mom and arranged for this girl to live in my old room, rent-free until she got back on her feet. On top of everything, she was also grieving the declining health and eventual loss of her grandmother. A few weeks into this arrangement, my mom called me, saying this girl had to go. Something wasn't right. This caused a massive uproar in the friend group. The girl accused my mom of being homophobic and kicking her out for no reason. The group sided with her, and I was essentially pushed out, staying in contact with only a few people who weren't buying her story because they knew my mom and sensed something was off. When I traveled home, I was shocked. My old room was completely trashed. This girl lived in absolute filth, garbage bags full of trash everywhere. Instead of washing dishes, she had been throwing them away after using them. But even worse, she had a drug problem and was a severe alcoholic, to the point that she had been verbally abusing my mom. Despite her begging to stay, we gave her until the end of the month to leave. My grandfather and someone from the group helped her move her things out. The place was left in a monstrous state, so I came by to help clean. While doing so, I found several checks in the name of her sick grandmother, checks she had been using to buy herself expensive art supplies. We contacted her family and learned the truth. Her parents hadn't kicked her out for being gay. They had kicked her out because she was stealing from her dying grandmother, who had since passed away, while she was supposed to be caring for her. She had been committing major fraud, using her grandmother's social security number to collect money while she was still barely alive. We reported her for fraud, and later, through a mutual friend, I found out she had a severe drug problem. I tried explaining all this to the group, but most of them thought I was exaggerating, except for one person who had experience with an addict sibling and recognized the behavior. It was heartbreaking. I lost a lot of friends who refused to believe the truth, choosing instead to label my mom as hateful, all because this girl had gotten to them first. Story 13. I've spoken about this before, but it's worth repeating. To this day, I still don't know if it was true or not, but what I found seemed to line up with what happened. A few years back, I was living with my then boyfriend, now ex. The relationship was far from great. He was clearly struggling with his mental health, but refused to seek help. As a result, he was emotionally abusive and neglectful toward me. One night, we were talking about nothing in particular when he suddenly decided to open up to me. Part of me thinks this was a manipulation tactic, but I'm not so sure anymore. He vaguely admitted to killing someone for surely assaulting his sister. I can understand why someone would do that, but I had no way of knowing if it was true. What I did know was that he was aware I was afraid of him. He had threatened to hit me before. So, knowing this only intensified my fear. One day while he was at work, I went onto his computer to look for a game to transfer to mine via LAN cable since we didn't have internet access. While searching for game files, I stumbled across a folder full of downloaded books and countless documents on how to hide a body, the best ways to kill someone, how to build bombs, and a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook. I confronted him about it and told him I didn't feel safe knowing he had those kinds of materials. His response? I'm keeping them and I don't really care about you, myself, or anyone around me. We broke up on the spot. He moved out shortly after. But what still haunts me is that as soon as he moved out, my little gray cat went missing. I never found him. I can only hope it was a coincidence. On the bright side, 2 years ago, a stray cat wandered into my yard. I gave him a piece of steak, and he's never left my side since. He's sleeping on my chest as I type this. Story 14. My uncle is the best family man I know. He was and still is like a father to me since my dad wasn't around much. He's also one of the funniest people I've ever met. He's amazing with the kids in the family. He even learned how to play Minecraft at 60 just to spend more time with his nephew, and he ended up getting super into it himself. My mother considers him the best brother she could ever have, but it turns out his past couldn't be further from who he is today. As teenagers, he used to torment my mother. At 17, he was arrested for a gang-related violent crime and was disowned by his family. In prison, he was disfigured after being jumped and beaten by a racial gang. After his release, he lived with a biker gang, and for 20 years, my family didn't even know if he was alive or dead. He went back to prison again, this time for manslaughter. Eventually, he met his wife and wanted to leave that life behind, but he was constantly harassed by old connections and coerced into doing things he deeply regrets. Things I don't think I should even mention. It wasn't until the Hells Angels rolled through and wiped out all the gangs in the area that he was finally free from that world. Nobody except the older generation of our family knows about this, and even most of them don't know the worst of it. Growing up, I only knew him as the bubbliest, most caring uncle. It wasn't until my 20s that I found out the truth. From what I've gathered from him and my mother, family became the most important thing to him. He carries deep guilt for the way he treated my mother, his little sister, and now he's an incredibly protective and loving brother. I honestly couldn't ask for a better man in my life. He may have been one of the worst people back then, but today he's the best man I know. Story 15. I knew an older Croatian man who was locally known as a saint. He had helped so many immigrant families who came to Canada, teaching them English, giving them a place to stay, and helping them find jobs. He was a wealthy man who lived alone. No wife, no children. He was in love with my grandma, and she was the one who told me the truth about how he got his wealth. He had been an assassin for the Ustashi, the Croatian extremist army that was influenced by the Nazis. He hadn't joined by choice. Back then, you didn't have a choice. One day, he and his best friend stumbled upon a hoard of Nazi gold. They stole as much as they could and had to literally kill their way out of Europe. They escaped to Canada, selling the gold for nearly $100,000 each, roughly $2 million in today's money. A few years later, his friend passed away and left everything to him. From that moment on, he dedicated his life to helping his people get established in the New World. Maybe it was a way to atone for the horrible things he had done. He never once returned to Croatia. When he passed, his funeral was already paid for, and it was incredibly simple. But the number of people who showed up was unbelievable. Hundreds of families he had helped came to pay their respects. He really did spend the rest of his life making up for his past. An incredible man, but with a past so dark it's almost hard to comprehend. I think deep down, my grandma may have shared feelings for him too, but she was married to another man and remained loyal to him, even after my grandpa passed in the 70s. Story 16. My parents used to live in a rural community until a few months ago, a place where the closest neighbor's house was at least 500 meters, about 1,600 feet, away, often even farther. But despite the distance, almost everyone knew each other. There was an elderly couple who lived 3 houses down from my parents. They were kind, always helping others. The wife could always be seen tending to their garden, and the husband was known for using his truck to help neighbors, giving rides to those without a vehicle to the bus stop 13 kilometers, about 9 miles away. He even used to drive my little sister, who was 13 at the time, whenever she needed a lift. Then one day they just vanished. For almost a month, their house sat eerily still. The garden went untended. The old man's truck remained parked in its usual spot, and their cats started showing up at neighbors' houses, clearly unfed. Concerns started spreading, and after 2 weeks, a group of neighbors finally went to the police, fearing the worst. But the police quickly dismissed them, saying the couple had been in a serious accident and were recovering in the hospital. No one was allowed to visit. Then after about a month, they suddenly returned. But things were different. The husband was now in a wheelchair, barely able to speak. The wife had scars all over her face and neck. Anytime someone asked about the accident, she'd change the subject. Since he barely spoke anymore, the community assumed it was some kind of trauma, so eventually people stopped asking and simply tried to support them however they could. Their daily routine changed. Every day she would push him around in his wheelchair along the main road, stopping to chat with neighbors. She remained as kind as ever, while he sat silently, his eyes holding a strange, distant gentleness. Then about a year and a half after they returned, he passed away. A few months later, she died too. It wasn't until their son arrived to take charge of the property that the truth about their accident came out. That day, the old man, who had been a retired Navy officer, had suffered a senile episode and stabbed his wife 16 times with a kitchen knife. Just as he was about to strike what could have been the fatal blow, he collapsed, breaking his hip. She crawled bleeding through the house and somehow managed to reach the phone to call their son. He told us he drove fast as the devil to get to them, then rushed both of them to the hospital. Miraculously, the wounds hadn't been too deep. Her husband had grown weaker with age, so she survived. What shocked us most was that she never harbored any hatred or fear toward him. She kept the truth a secret from everyone because she didn't want him to be shunned or treated differently. The reason he barely spoke after returning was that he had never mentally recovered from his breakdown. He genuinely believed everyone around him was a spy, someone to be stabbed. Even after learning the truth, we struggled to understand why their son allowed them to live alone again. And even more so, we found it almost impossible to reconcile the violent reality of what had happened with the image of the kind, gentle couple we had known. Story 17. When I was 27, my best friend went to prison for causing death by dangerous driving. He had no prior criminal record, showed full remorse, and behaved well inside, so he only served around 15 months of a 2-year sentence. I was lucky enough to visit him 3 or 4 times during his sentence. He was in a prison about 3 hours south of our hometown in southwest England, and I'd get a lift down with his fiancée. Visiting slots were limited, so I was grateful for the time we had. On our drives down, his fiancée and I would make small talk. I always got along fine with her, though it's worth mentioning that some people, including my girlfriend at the time, and a few of my best mates' other friends, had a poor opinion of her. One thing I noticed on every trip was how much she pushed the idea that she loved him. She would go on and on about how she couldn't wait for him to get out, how she'd wait for him no matter how long it took. I was relieved to hear it. He had just lost his mom while inside. The last thing he needed was an unfaithful fiancée. There had already been rumors before he went to prison that she was cheating. Neither of us believed it. It didn't seem possible. Before his sentence, he was either at work or home with her. When would she have had the time? The last time we visited him together, about 3 months before his release, we stopped halfway down for a break. She got out to grab some snacks and use the restroom. She left her phone face up on the seat. It dinged. A message flashed on the screen. I can't wait to view again this. I only saw the beginning of the message, but that was enough. I had to sit in the prison visiting hall, watching my best friend and his fiancée talk about how excited they were to get married once he got out, all while knowing she was screwing someone else. I couldn't tell him, not while he was in prison, grieving his mom. I was terrified it would push him over the edge, but he found out soon enough. 2 weeks before their wedding, she left him. They lost the £5,000 deposit they had put down for the wedding. Turned out she had been sleeping with her manager at work since the day my mate went inside, maybe even longer. Story 18. I wouldn't say he was someone very close to me, but I used to go to festivals a lot, always with the same group. Close friends, friends of friends, and often new people. One of the guys in that group I only ever saw at festivals, but I saw him a lot, maybe 15 times a year. We always got along great, talked a lot at parties and just vibed, but outside of festivals, I never had the urge to grab a drink with him or hang out. We were friendly, but I wouldn't necessarily call us friends. Then one day someone from our group dropped a news article in our WhatsApp chat. It had a name we didn't recognize and a blurred picture of someone who looked an awful lot like him. Apparently, he had died in an accident by driving his car straight into an oncoming truck. At first, we were confused. None of us recognized the name in the article. Later, we realized the media had used his full name, while we had always called him by a shortened version. The more we looked at the photo, the more we were sure it was him, but none of his closer friends were in our group, so we had no way to get more details. That same day, more news broke. It wasn't an accident. It was suicide. He had driven into that truck on purpose because he was being chased by the police. And the reason he was being chased? He was a major suspect in a pedophile trafficking ring. Then the most disturbing part came out. He had been caught on camera in an Eastern European country, fleeing the scene of a murder. We were in shock. He had seemed like such a normal, friendly guy. I had shaken hands with him. We had hugged. In the days that followed, even more disturbing news surfaced. He wasn't just involved, he was deep into it. The details of what he had done to children were horrifying. Things you don't even want to imagine. It's been years, but I still feel sick when I think about it. I spent so much time laughing and partying with someone who, in secret, was doing things beyond disgusting. I had no idea who I was really standing next to. Story 19. At my previous job, my old boss was a nice woman, bit of a drinker. She knew I'd been through some horrendous incidents with my ex-husband, so maybe she felt comfortable opening up to me. One evening, after having too much alcohol in her coffee cup, she decided to spill her deepest, darkest secret. A year or so before, she had taken time off work, supposedly for a ruptured ovarian cyst. That was a lie. What really happened was that her ex had raped her. He strangled her with her own dressing gown cord until she passed out. She became pregnant as a result. She was a tiny woman and didn't show. She didn't tell anyone. Then at around 7.5 months, she went into labor and gave birth to a boy who looked exactly like his father. She said she absolutely could not be that boy's parent, so she gave him up for adoption. She faked the ruptured cyst as an excuse for her time off work. Her ex, the rapist, knows nothing about the child. She's convinced that if he ever found out, he'd kill her and go looking for the boy. She said the adoption was closed, but once the child turns 18, he'll have the legal right to search for his birth parents. That was part of the contract. She lives in fear of that day. What she told me horrified me to my core. I didn't know what to say, what to do with the information. And the next day, she either didn't remember telling me or pretended she did. I left that job not long after, but I still see her from time to time. She's in a long-term relationship with her current partner, and I've overheard people ask her, "So when are you settling down and starting a family?" Or, "You don't have any kids yet?" Every time I see her flinch, my heart breaks for her. Story 20. How my grandmother died. My mom was raised by her grandparents, and the story my family always told me and my siblings was that in the 80s, her mom worked with the police and died as a result of a robbery gone wrong. They tried to take her car and purse, and inside her purse were work-related items. I was told it was something like a badge, and they killed her when they found it. I'm in my late 20s, and this is the story I've always been told. To be honest, I never questioned it or inquired further because my mom is still deeply affected by it, as she was very young when it happened. Well, my great-grandparents passed away some years ago, and I guess no one ever wanted to talk about it again. I was still hesitant to ask my mom about it, but for a while I've been curious. I couldn't find anything in old newspapers, which seemed odd to me since even back then, an incident like that should have made the news. So I carefully brought up the subject with my mom, and she told me that she had believed the same thing until she had to sort out the house and inheritance matters after my great-grandparents passed away. What actually happened was that her mother had very serious mental health struggles, and my grandfather being away a lot due to work, while they had 2 toddler-aged daughters, didn't help. One day, my grandmother locked both my mom and my aunt in another room for a nap, and when they fell asleep, she took her own life. The 2 of them were only let out when their father came home and discovered what had happened. It was never reported in the news because, well, it was the 80s, and no one wanted to talk about mental health struggles. The family kept it quiet. Since my aunt was from my grandmother's first marriage, she went to live with her biological father, while my mom stayed with my grandfather, who later passed away from alcohol poisoning. I only found out about this because my mom and her sister are trying to reconnect after years of being distant. My aunt told my mom that some days she just wants to give up like mom did. That was a difficult conversation. Story 21. Last year I worked at a restaurant as a server, food runner, and in takeout. The job was only a few minutes from my place. I was the youngest person there and clearly didn't fit in since most of my coworkers had been there longer. I was able to make a few work friends and exchange Snapchats with some of them, but I got really close to a struggling single mom. Her husband had cheated on her and she had lost her son a few years earlier. She was reserved but kind. I won't lie, I had a little crush on her. She had freckles and the most sparkling blue eyes. We became close and exchanged numbers. When I quit unexpectedly, she was the person I spoke to before walking out. I hugged her and later texted her, telling her how much I appreciated her making my time there worthwhile. My fiance and I moved to another state but didn't have the resources for a large moving truck. So we left most of our belongings in storage and made frequent trips back to retrieve them. On our most recent trip, I decided to stop by my old job to say hi to her. We talked, hugged, and everything seemed fine. A few months later, my fiance saw a post she made about her late son. Something about it didn't sit right, so we looked into it. Her son was 5 years old and autistic. He was nonverbal and couldn't even tie his shoelaces. He was found dead, locked and buckled inside a hot car, completely unclothed. She told the police he must have climbed out the window and done that himself. But again, he couldn't even tie his shoes. When they investigated her phone, they found disturbing messages between her and her husband discussing locking their son in a cage. There were Google searches asking whether people cry while they're dying. She had locked her own child in that car and watched as he suffocated. I have never been more horrified in my life. Story 22. My wife has admitted to having violent thoughts about harming our cats when she gets extremely upset. On 3 separate occasions, she has told me that she seriously considered it. To clarify, these cats are my emotional support animals. I'm a veteran with PTSD, and the only thing that helped me get off the psychotropic medication I was prescribed was these fur babies. I even have a prescription for them from my VA therapist. Most of the time, my wife is a loving and caring pet mom, but when things don't go her way and she's under a lot of stress, she talks about harming innocent creatures. I used to think it was just a weird quirk that she despised chipmunks. She can't stand the sound they make. When she lived with her dad, she used an air rifle to get rid of them for years because she said they were too noisy. At first I brushed it off, but now I don't feel entirely comfortable with any of this. I know that if she ever harmed my cats, I would lose it completely. No matter how much I care about her, nothing would stop me from retaliating in some way. I despise violence, but I believe that no one should harm innocent beings. I can't talk to anyone in my family or among my friends about this because I know they would never trust my wife around their children, and every single one of them would call me an idiot for staying with her. Story 23. My best friend, whom I had known since we were 3 years old, attempted to assault a girl I was seeing when we were both 19. It happened during a New Year's party hosted by a friend of mine. It was around 2 to 3 a.m. and both of us were drunk. My cousin, who was completely wasted, asked me to take him home, which was only 5 houses down. I asked the girl if she wanted to come with me, but she said she'd stay since her best friend was there, and they were playing drinking games with my group of friends. I don't know what happened, but I passed out in my living room and didn't wake up until the next day. When I went back to my friend's house to pick her up, she told me she had fun, blacked out, and fell asleep with her best friend and some others. It wasn't until last year, 12 years later, that an old friend from that group brought up that night. He asked if the girl had ever told me what happened. Confused, I said no. That's when he told me that around 5 a.m., everyone had passed out. He woke up around 6 to use the bathroom and found my best friend pulling his pants down while on top of the unconscious girl I was seeing. Her pants and underwear were down. My friend confronted him, kicked him out, covered the girl up, and woke her best friend to tell her what had happened. I don't know why he didn't tell me back then, but shortly after that night, the girl cut things off with me, saying she didn't think it would work. After finding this out, I immediately reached out to her and apologized. I cut ties with my best friend and haven't spoken to him since. When I reached out to his ex-girlfriends and mutual female friends, I discovered he had attempted to assault a total of 9 women between the ages of 15 and 24. Story 24. One day I learned from my mother that my aunt had been a member of the Brigade Ross Red Brigades, a left-wing terrorist organization that terrorized Italy in the 70s and 80s. For those unfamiliar, they were responsible for numerous kidnappings, torture, and murders, targeting industrial leaders, police officers, district attorneys, judges, and politicians, all under the pretense of achieving a so-called dictatorship of the proletariat. In 1978, they kidnapped and assassinated Italy's Prime Minister, Aldo Moro. My mother told me that my aunt was actually present at the meeting where they decided to carry out that attack. Later, I learned that my aunt was arrested, though I don't know the exact charge. However, in order to get out of jail, she allegedly engaged in sexual activity with another member of the organization inside the courtroom during the trial. Apparently, the terrorists were held in adjacent cages, one for men and one for women. There are even pictures of this incident online. Their associates covered them with jackets, and amidst the general confusion, they did what they had planned through the bars. As shocking as it sounds, she successfully became pregnant. A regrettable outcome, to say the least. And thanks to her pregnancy, she managed to avoid serious consequences and walked free. And that is how my cousin was born. Unsurprisingly, he later turned out to be just as rotten as his parents, But that's a story for another time. Story 25. I found out that my dad had an emotional affair while married to my mom. To make a long story short, he suffered a major heart attack, which doctors said was complicated by a series of smaller, undiagnosed heart attacks that had already damaged his heart. He was rushed into an emergency open heart bypass surgery with only a 5% chance of survival. During this time, we were trying to hold everything together, preparing for the worst. I was put in charge of his phone and laptop to answer work calls and emails. He was still employed at the time. His boss, being the jackass that he was, actually had the nerve to say, "Well, we expected him in an hour ago," when I informed him of the situation. I wanted to scream. He's literally on an operating table, cracked open like a lobster right now, so get bent. But that's a story for another time. While managing his phone, an unknown number called. I answered, assuming it might be a coworker. The caller immediately hung up without a word. I thought it was odd. If someone got an unexpected person on the line, they'd at least say, "Oh, did I dial the wrong number?" I called back, but it was declined after a single ring. Curiosity got the best of me. I checked his text and found one from that number. It's a lace and fishnet stockings kind of day. It was the only message there, likely because the others had been deleted. A bit of internet sleuthing revealed the number belonged to a woman in Canada. That's when I dug into his email. Sure enough, I found romantic exchanges between him and an address that matched the name I traced to that phone number. The next day I tried calling her back, thinking she might assume my dad was calling her. I was right. She answered in the tone of someone expecting a familiar voice. But the moment I said, "Hi, sorry, this is my dad's phone. I'm reaching out to his contacts to let them know he's in the hospital," her tone went completely cold. She insisted she had no idea who he was. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I made sure to casually mention his wife, my mom. I could tell by her response that she realized I knew and was trying to shake me off. She scrambled to end the call. After my dad regained consciousness, he asked for his phone and computer back to take care of business. That night, I checked his email again and briefly saw a draft message addressed to her. It only had a single sentence before it vanished. By the next day, he had changed his email password. He knew I had found out and locked me out. I never told my mom. My dad passed away in 2020, and she has been devastated ever since. Every other day, she texts me something like, "I still miss him so much." After he died, I wiped his phone and computer before my mom or sister could go through them. If my mom had found out, it would have destroyed her. My sister, on the other hand, would have used it just to hurt her. But when I checked, there was nothing. No texts, no emails, no deleted call logs, nothing. He had died suddenly, without warning, so if something was still going on, I would have found traces of it. Maybe after surviving that first heart attack, he decided to get his life together. Story 26. There are a few things I need to get off my chest. My mom was in a horrific car crash as a teenager that left her with significant brain damage. By all accounts, she should have died. Sometime after the accident, while she was visiting one of her older sisters with their mom in another city, possibly for treatment, something unthinkable happened. That night, when her sister and their mom went to bed, my mom was left alone in the house with her sister's boyfriend. He took my underage mother out in his car, raped her, then picked up a friend who also assaulted her. As far as I know, she never told her sister. My mom was also a serial cheater, both before and after the accident. My dad was with her through all of it, though maybe on and off at times. He actually planned to leave her before they got married, but she convinced him to stay. That pattern didn't change. She kept cheating, including after my brother was born, but before I was conceived, at least as far as my dad knows. At one point, my mom confided in my older sister about wanting to leave my dad. She even asked my sister to look at apartment ads with her. My sister was in her early teens at the time, and it really messed her up. One morning before school, my sister, or maybe it was my mom, I can't remember, asked me who I would rather live with. I was numb all day, trying to process it. I must have been in 5th or 6th grade. When I got home, I asked my parents what was happening. That led to a serious conversation. My dad may have even taken the day off work. By the end of it, they decided to stay together. So, all in all, my parents love each other, but I don't think they're in love anymore. They just celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. I was also recently told that my mom is likely developing early onset Alzheimer's. It's strange when you realize your parents aren't superheroes. They're just deeply flawed people. I love them both. They still get along, and honestly, they're like best friends. But I see them for who they are now. Story 27. This past year has been full of shocking revelations. First, my dad passed away. He was a quiet man, reserved, never one to make waves. And then after he was gone, I found out that he had been unfaithful to my mom for decades with her best friend. As if that wasn't enough, I also discovered that I have a brother who was adopted out before I was even born, but I have a big secret of my own. Back when I was working in the industry, I had a client who murdered his wife. She was also a client of mine. He killed her using cyanide. Not long after her death, he contacted me, wanting to set up a date. During our conversation, he casually mentioned that his wife had passed away. The moment I heard it, I knew he was responsible. Shortly after, the police reached out to me because my contact details had been found in their investigation. I met with a detective over coffee, and together we devised a plan where I would try to gather information that could lead to his arrest. Looking back, it was absolute madness to get involved. He was an evil human being, but before justice could truly catch up to him, he died from pancreatic cancer. His wife had been a lost soul. Both of them drank way too much, and as if taking her life wasn't enough, he also had her two beloved purebred dogs put down. Hey were beautiful, well-cared-for animals, and he had them destroyed simply because they were hers. The whole situation was so surreal that it even ended up on TV. They blurred my face and altered my voice in the broadcast. To this day, it still feels unreal that I went through all of that. Story 28. He wasn't a close friend, but he was close enough for me to witness the fallout. I never let myself get too close to him because he always came off as selfish and honestly, kind of a jerk. But my entire friend group at the time was super close to him. We had all been friends since middle school until everything unraveled when I was a junior in high school. His stepsister, who was in the same grade as him, started speaking out, saying that he, let's call him Charlie, had groped her. My friends listened to everything she said and started questioning him about it. His story was something along the lines of, we were 6 and I put my hand up her shirt. He brushed it off saying, we were just kids. I didn't know any better. His stepsister had struggled with mental health issues and he used that to discredit her. Then things escalated. One of her friends showed up at another friend's house one night, banging on his window, screaming about how he was supporting a predator. We ignored it at the time. I wasn't sure what to believe, but I had already started distancing myself from them because of their increasing drug use. Fast forward a few months. One of my closest friends, let's call him Jake, let Charlie crash at his house for the weekend. They were like brothers, inseparable, and Jake was one of the most well-liked people in our group. That night, Charlie passed out on the couch while Jake was using his phone to sell drugs. While scrolling through contacts, Jake stumbled upon something sickening. It was a video of Charlie running down the hallway of his house, setting up his phone in an angle that overlooked the bathroom. Moments later, his stepsister walked in, stripped naked, and started showering. There were rumors about what else he might have found. Some said there were multiple videos of her. Others said he had even filmed himself inside the bathroom with her, still without her knowledge. But none of these were told to me directly by Jake. Jake panicked. He had no idea what to do. So he went to another trusted friend. Let's call him Chris. Chris and Jake were two of the most respected people in our friend group, but even they didn't know how to handle something this heavy. Instead of taking action, they sat on this information for over a month. Eventually, word got out, and when it did, all hell broke loose. Within hours, everyone knew. His girlfriend, his family, his stepbrother, who was also in our group. His stepbrother beat the absolute hell out of him, stole his Xbox, and left him bloody. His entire friend group turned against him. And that was the breaking point. The incident completely fractured our friend group. Everyone went their separate ways. Jake, who already had abandonment issues from losing his father at a young age, was destroyed by the betrayal. He spiraled into drinking and drug use, but this time, mostly alone. Chris reacted similarly, but then did a complete 180 and became almost unrecognizable in personality. As for Charlie, his girlfriend beat him up too, but for some reason, she stayed with him. To this day, she denies anything ever happened. He tried reaching out to some of the guys in the group over the years, but their responses were always short. One night, Jake got really high and showed up at Charlie's window, asking if they could hang out like old times. And they did. His stepsister, however, refused to let it be swept under the rug. She told her parents. Instead of supporting her, they told her to stay quiet because speaking out would ruin the family. She fought for justice, pushing for a lawsuit or some form of punishment, but nothing happened beyond a slap on the wrist. She went to the school. The school called the police. She submitted an apology letter that Charlie had written her. But the letter wasn't an apology at all. It was manipulative, saying, "I'm sorry. Look at what you did. I'm going to kill myself because you spoke out. I'm sorry." The police took the letter as evidence, and statements were taken from people in our friend group. But I have no idea what came of it. Charlie was removed from the home for a while, but not long after he moved back in. Now he runs with an even worse crowd than before. This new group is full of people even more reckless than we were. One of his new friends stabbed his girlfriend during a drug-fueled fight. Another has multiple allegations of sexual assault. And you know what? I think Charlie feels more at home with them than he ever did with us. He doesn't have to hide who he is anymore. They accept him, or maybe they're just all the kind of people who justify everything they do. Did he get what he deserved? Absolutely not. And that's exactly why I chose to share this story. Out of all the horrible people I've known, because no matter what he did, no matter how serious the crime, people forgot. They made a big deal out of it for a little while, then moved on. Meanwhile, his stepsister lives with severe anxiety and paranoia. She gets bullied for speaking out, and she's the one who will be haunted by this for the rest of her life. Story 29. My grandparents had 4 children, but one was disowned. The other 3 remained in good standing with the family. Before my grandmother passed away, she appointed her son-in-law as her power of attorney. While she was in hospice, he changed her will. Now, I'm not going to say she was wealthy, but she had life insurance from my grandfather, a substantial settlement from his death due to mesothelioma, and she had won a few lawsuits over slip-and-fall incidents. Altogether, she likely had around $700,000 in liquid assets. After she passed, those of us who didn't live nearby came to help sort out her belongings. My father, uncle, teenage cousin, and I, also a teenager at the time, worked to clean out her place and handle everything. When the will was read, my father and uncle were each left $30,000. The grandchildren from those 2 received just $1,000 each. Meanwhile, the uncle by marriage, who had been granted power of attorney and was also the executor, somehow had his 14-year-old kid driving a brand new car and their house completely paid off. Beyond the financial distribution, valuable items, both monetary and sentimental, were taken by that side of the family. My aunt, uncle, and their kids walked away with everything. I have no idea if my cousins from that branch of the family knew what happened, but I haven't spoken to any of them in over 25 years. I might have been more willing to forgive and forget, but they always treated me and my cousins terribly anyway.